Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in the room to please follow the recommendations from public health authorities as well as directive of the Board of Internal Economy from October 19, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me, as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Witnesses should also be aware that translation in both English and French is available through the globe icon at the bottom of their screen. I would like to welcome our witnesses this evening for our first panel. From Canadian Refugee Sponsorship Agreement Holders Association, we have Kaylee Perez, and from the Ted Rogers School of Management, we have Dr. Wendy Kukier, founder, Lifeline Afghanistan, and professor at Ryerson University. And Maria Turpakai Foundation, we have Maria Turpakai Wazir, president and founder. Welcome to each of you, and you will have 5 minutes of your opening remarks. Please respect the time so I don't need to intervene. And first we will start with Ms. Perez. Go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable committee members, for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and most recently the Haudenosaunee people. Merci pour le travail important.
Thank you for the important work of this committee in dealing with this urgent situation.
Acknowledge those who have been impacted by the Taliban's takeover, the millions of Afghans living under Taliban rule in need of vital humanitarian relief, the thousands who've been newly displaced as a result, and the millions of Afghan refugees whose needs predate the Taliban takeover. I'm here in representation of the Canadian Refugee Sponsorship Agreement Holders Association. We are the national umbrella organization for 130 sponsorship agreement holders, or SAWs for short, across Canada outside of Quebec. I imagine you're familiar with the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program, or the PSR program, as I'll refer to it moving forward. But in short, our organizations hold an agreement with the government that enables us to add to government resettlement commitments by facilitating the private sponsorship of refugees from around the world. Each year, the government sets the total number of spaces, one space per individual refugee, that SAWs can access to submit new sponsorship applications. SAWs and the diverse communities in which they are embedded stand ready to welcome more Afghan nationals. SAWs are eagerly awaiting an announcement on how the additional commitment of 20,000 spaces for Afghan nationals will be distributed. SAWs are receiving many inquiries from Canadians who are wanting to respond, many whom know of Afghan refugees they would like to name to bring to Canada. Without further information, there are limits to the ways SAWs can effectively inform and mobilize our communities and effectively plan for this increased engagement. While wanting to assist with the Afghan initiative, SAWs are concerned about the impact this response will have on the existing inventory. I was just on a call last week with a sponsor supporting a 22-year-old Congolese refugee currently in Namibia. He has been separated from his mother and siblings for 7 years and has had to literally fight for his life while awaiting for his case to be processed to come to Canada. This Congolese refugee and his sponsor were both concerned about the impact the Afghan and Ukrainian response could have in delaying his case further. With a historic high inventory of over 70,000 persons in the system, most of whom are in just as much need as Afghan refugees, the government needs to ensure IRCC is funded sufficiently to process the Afghan response, the new Ukrainian response, and the existing caseload. One key recommendation we wish to bring to the committee is for the government to develop a framework for immigration and refugee responses to emergencies that sets objective criteria. This would allow all of the actors involved to be well prepared to act quickly and would help maintain transparency and equity in the strategic use of resettlement. SAWS are a longstanding, reliable, and risk-managed partner of the government in refugee resettlement. The PSR program can play a significant role in emergency responses by providing an avenue for family reunification and for community building. SAWS carry infrastructure that is worth investing in, not only to manage current interest, but also to support the quality of post-arrival settlement and the long-term integration of newcomers. We stand well poised to help government harness public interest, but need to scale up our capacity to do so. And in December of 2021, just last December, we met with the Minister of Immigration, Sean Fraser, and proposed the creation of a public-private national SAW capacity building fund. We believe there is an opportunity to make use of this surge moment to build infrastructure for sustainability. So in summary, our 4 key messages are: SAWS need more information on the distribution of the additional 20,000 commitment to effectively plan and engage. IRCC needs to be funded sufficiently to process the existing inventory, Afghan and Ukrainian responses. An emergency response framework with objective criteria is needed to maintain equity and transparency in the strategic use of resettlement. And SAWS are a reliable and risk-managed partner in refugee resettlement. A private-public national SAW capacity building fund could support our ability to work with you to meet the demand of both public interest and Afghan need. We look forward to continuing to work toward our shared goal of assisting those displaced by the situation in Afghanistan in a timely way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perez, right on time. Appreciate that. Now we will move to Dr. Wendy Sakir, please.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate being invited to meet with the committee in doing its important work. I will not repeat what Kaylee talked about in terms of the humanitarian crisis or the important role that sponsorship agreement holders play. I lead the Diversity Institute at Ryerson University. I've been a private sponsor of Indo-Chinese refugees as part of Operation Lifeline in 1979. I led the Ryerson University Lifeline Syria Challenge in 2015, which raised $5 million and privately sponsored 500 Syrian refugees in a matter of months. And since then, has continued to support the expansion of those refugees. And in August, we created Lifeline Afghanistan to build on that experience in creating public-private partnerships, in leveraging civil society, as well as harnessing the power of post-secondary institutions, students, volunteers, and others. And although it is absolutely critical that the quotas for the SAWS be adjusted to the needs of Afghan refugees, it's also important to note that private sponsorships through the Group of 5 arrangements can contribute in a very significant way. And I'll just echo what Kaylee said about the outpouring of support we have from Canadians, from donors, from civil society, from private corporations ready to provide jobs as well as funds to privately sponsor Afghan refugees, and to ask, please, for you to give consideration to streamlining the processes, to removing the red tape, to eliminating the need for UNHCR designation, to basically replicate what was done in 2015 to allow the government of Canada to resettle 20,000 Syrian refugees in 4 months. We have the capacity, we've done it before, and we can do it again. I also wanted to flag the importance. I lead the Future Skills Center research efforts. And while the humanitarian message has been delivered over and over again, I really want to reinforce the economic importance of creating pathways for newcomers generally, for refugees in particular. We have employers who have come to us and said, we have 5,000 unfilled jobs. Can you provide Afghan refugees? And of course, we don't have the pipeline. We've been working with small, medium enterprises who have crippling labor shortages, who are prepared to offer jobs, but do not have pipeline to Afghan refugees. We have post-secondary institutions who have offered positions to Afghans. In fact, I'm sure the committee heard of the case of one post-secondary student who completed a term while in Afghanistan and was denied a student visa because of the dual intent provisions. And so were you to do a few things, our recommendations would be, of course, address Kaylee's concern about the numbers to help the SAWS plan, but open up the opportunity for private citizens to leverage government investments to privately sponsor Afghan refugees. We need to have the same provisions in place that were put in place in 2015 to streamline the Afghan effort, and think about post-secondary pathways as another opportunity to build Canada's capacity to meet the needs of employers. And I'm happy to provide more details in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sakhir. Appreciate the time. And now we will be going to President Wazir for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead. We cannot hear. You're on mute, President Wazir. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm so happy to speak to you all today, especially about my ancestral land, Afghanistan. I come from Waziristan. If you know, it was known as the most dangerous place on earth because of the terrorism and Talibanization, and I grew up at that in that region. But I was known as the Genghis Khan there, not Maria, and I grew up like boys. So nobody knew, and then eventually I ended up in sports. My dad and my mom, they all their life worked in tribal areas in Waziristan, educating girls. And my dad believed that the change has to start from our own family. So he believed that our sons and daughters are equal. So he gave me all the freedom and opportunity to be free and to excel, though we didn't have schools or anything. So my mom, whatever she could do, she would educate the girls and, you know, run a school there. My sister would go just to encourage other girls. But eventually I turned professional squash player, though it was a very difficult journey on its own because, you know, on the way I did get threats, a lot of harassment and abuse, and also you know, a threat from Taliban. This was all part of this. And then I went in hiding for 3 years, and I sent email all over the world to different colleges, universities, clubs, wherever I could find this, you know, a squash court, and offering them a job opportunity as a part-time, but asking them for you know, a time and help with, so I can train myself. But anyways, I became third in world juniors, and I won many international tournaments. I was 41 in the world. And all this training was at the same time. I taught myself, because this area and this region and the mentality of the people has so much patriarchy and conservativeness. And in this Pashtun region, I know that the Taliban is one thing, but everyone there has this same mentality as Taliban. This is the culture, and you know, they don't believe that women are equal. They don't believe that women should be going out, or going to schools or sports. But there are other reasons to that, because for centuries, a lot of men are shy, and a lot of men are covering their shyness under this umbrella of religion, because they say, and culture, they say that women should not go out. But the reason is that there are no opportunities. There are no such facilities, where our women can actually go, and the schools also, like, to some certain level they can go, but then after that, it's again a lot of struggle. Like they're afraid if something happens to their daughters on the way, it will be a biggest shame. So there are a lot of things, and I think education is needed there. A lot of awareness is needed. I know when I started, it was a lot of people were against me and my dad, my family. We had to move from area to area. Our house was attacked. My dad was put in mental jail for educating his wife and daughters. And, but the thing is that now the people want him to come back, and now they name their daughters on my name, my sister's name. So things can change, and I've seen the change. And the area where I used to be the only girl playing sports, now there are 27 girls. They come in burqa, and then they change into tracksuit, and then when they stretch, and then they run to the ball and jump and dive. They never thought that they can do those things. So and to me, this is my dream, to see all those girls have the freedom. And I I have been going back to those areas. There were times when the Taliban were all everywhere. There were bomb blasts, and every day. But the times changed, and now I see quite peace there compared to those times. And though in Afghanistan, what happened? Afghanistan is my ancestral land, because my great grandfather was second to King Amanullah, and we have land in host area. And we are Wazir tribe. Wazir is the biggest main tribe in Waziristan. And then Taliban are no different than me. We are by blood, we are all cousins. They understand my language, I understand them. And whenever I send them a message through social media, they do watch it, they do understand it. And I do have the following for that. And I feel that I know the psychology of my people. They're Pashtuns. If you treat them with love and respect, they will die for you. And if you challenge them, it's a different mentality. Then they do die for that too. So and I think that I was in the beginning, I had difficulties in that region, but now again, the more the more that I speak to them with love and care and respect, and they listen, and they also want to tell me that, and I speak three different languages.
Could you wrap up, please?
Yes. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And I am working on building a sports school for these Afghan refugees who recently arrived in Pakistan. So yes, that's a lot going on.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you on your achievements, and thank you to your parents for taking the leadership, Ms. Wazir. And now we can go to our honorable members of parliament, and I'm going to start with my own member of parliament, Madam Finlay, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here, and I'll say a thank you to Ms. Wazir's father, because clearly her mom and dad did a lot to make her who she is today. Wendy, how do I pronounce your last name, please?
Sukir, but just call me Wendy.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to see if you could expand a little bit on how the IRCC, how its current measures could be streamlined. You talked about that, but I'd like to give you just a little, maybe another minute on that, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'm not a specialist in these areas, but in 2015, IRCC made a number of changes to its normal procedures in order to meet the very ambitious targets that were established for Syrian refugees. So first and foremost, Syrians became prima facie refugees without having to have UNHCR designation. That opened up incredible opportunities for both private sponsorship through sponsorship agreement holders, which don't require UNHCR designation generally, but also for group of five sponsorship. So that for us is critically important because we know that UNHCR is not capable right now of processing the volume of applicants that would need to be processed. Canada still addressed the health and security issues, but we did it in real time much more quickly. So that's really one of the things that's important. Certainly,
you segued nicely into my next question. So you agree that prima facie refugee status would be very helpful?
I think it's essential. And I think, the second point is, as Kaylee mentioned, I think that the sponsorship agreement holders and settlement organizations do an amazing job, but they're not designed for dealing with spikes in volumes easily. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about private sponsorship and engaging civil society, the private sector, and so on, is we can deal with spikes and high volumes very quickly. And so in addition to addressing the quota issues with the sponsorship agreement holders, and I think everybody agrees that the quotas for Afghans, in order to meet the government's ambitious targets, need to be in addition to others so that we are not making trade-offs. But we need to also facilitate group of five formation. And, we have more detailed recommendations on that. I think the final thing that is incredibly important is to be innovative. And I know the minister has talked about the EMPP program. I think if we continue to think about ways we can use student visas and other mechanisms to help create pathways in addition to private sponsorship, I believe that we can meet the government's targets in a short period of time, and people will not die who would otherwise not survive.
Thank you. This is for Ms. Perez. What is your view on removing caps in order that more Afghan refugees can be privately sponsored?
Thank you for the question, Member Finley, and Wendy for all that you've interjected. It's been great to hear from you. I thank you for this question. I think first and foremost, want to say that Afghans are in need, and our association has also raised concerns just about the limits to the eligibility criteria currently. To be eligible to be privately sponsored as an Afghan, you must fit one of 5 categories. And so our association has had concerns about that and has been interested in seeing that removed so that all Afghans have access. One thing I think that's important to consider here with this decision is our existing inventory and capacity. So we have a historic high inventory, as I shared. Over half of the current inventory is made up of group of 5 and community sponsorship cases. One of the realities in terms of efficiency of processing cases, groups of 5 and community sponsorship cases take longer to process at the ROCO level, at the department within Ottawa, before they're sent overseas. And I also think that there is a dynamic that many groups of 5 and community sponsors would submit their cases via a sponsorship agreement holder if they could, but SAWs ultimately are limited by our spaces and our capacity. I think that there is an important role that groups of 5 and community sponsors play, but I think it's important for us to learn from the Syrian response and the impact of that rapid response. And so I think there's something to say here that SAWs are our risk managed partner. We support program integrity, and it would be great for us to be able to work and support more groups who, as a result of not being able to sponsor through a sponsorship agreement holder, then often are left with the route of a group of 5 or a community sponsorship application. So those are some of the considerations I would share.
You, Ms. Finley, time is almost over. So next one, we'll go to Mr. Baker for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. And Wendy, it's good to see you again. We've had the pleasure of working together in a number of different forums. You've attended an event in Etobicoke in the past on International Women's Day, if I'm not mistaken, and of course I had the chance to, when I was a member of provincial parliament at Queen's Park, to work with you on an event held by the Diversity Institute. Anyway, it's good to see you again, and thank you for your leadership and advocacy on this important issue. I will start with my questions to Ms. Perez, if that's okay. And Ms. Perez, I'm hoping you can help me sort of flesh out some of the things that you were talking about. One of them was can you just talk about what are the SAW's capacity to resettle and support additional numbers of refugees? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Minister Baker. So there are 130 sponsorship agreement holders in Canada, many who have been involved since 1979. And over the past few years, I have some stats here in terms of landings. So we have resettled over 18,000 privately sponsored refugees a year since 2016. I would say that's all of the privately sponsored refugees who've arrived to Canada. So not all of those numbers are reflective of the cases that sponsorship agreement holders have done. However, we do represent a significant number of the resettlement numbers. We are a diverse association who are actively connected across faith-based, ethnocultural, and humanitarian networks, who have longstanding experience in having been involved in private sponsorship and the effective settlement of refugees for many years. One of the realities that I would also mention is that we've grown significantly over the past 7 years. So we were about 80 organizations who did around 6,000 sponsorships a year, and over the past 7 years have grown to now be 130 organizations. And much of that growth is due to the Syrian response and the growing need of refugees globally. One of the important considerations around SAW capacity is within our association, we are diverse in our capacity in terms of how we are structured and the number of sponsorships that we do. When it comes to interest in Afghan resettlement, we did run a focus group and did some stats. So there are 66 sponsorship agreement holders who've expressed interest in engaging in the resettlement of Afghans. And who also have expressed that they have capacity to engage. There are 12 SAWs who each are interested in doing more than 100 spaces. So that gives you a sense of where the interest is at within our association. And I think many are eager to engage, but the reality is that 20% of the SAWs within our association have 2 or more full-time employees. The rest are either volunteer run or have a combination of part-time staff and volunteers who are working together to facilitate sponsorship. And so while we do have the interest and the desire to scale up, to do that in a healthy way, SAWs are asking for support in being able to hire additional staff to manage the growth of cases and to support quality settlement post-arrival.
Okay, this is helpful. Now, look, I've only got 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and hopefully we can get to them briefly. I hope. Look, my understanding is that there's been hundreds of thousands of Afghans that have been recognized by UNHCR, and have we looked at resettling them?
So your question is, are we looking at resettling the refugees that have already been identified by the UNHCR pre-Taliban takeover?
Well, I won't speak to pre or post. I think what I'm just asking is, my understanding is that they've been designated or recognized by the UNHCR, and I'm just wondering whether those are sort of some of the folks that you were trying to resettle or not. Yeah.
Maybe I'll quickly respond, and I see, Wendy, you're wanting to jump in. I think that what I would say is Afghans were in the top 5 refugees in need of resettlement pre-2021. There are some cases that have been privately sponsored that are within our existing inventory, but post-Taliban takeover, as has already been shared, there have been difficulties in accessing UNHCR registration. And so as a result, that limits their ability to be sponsored via groups of 5 and community sponsors. However, sponsorship agreement holders do have the ability to submit those cases if they are Afghan refugees who are outside of Afghanistan.
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to say something about this. So recently, when all the things the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, I know that my dad, some of my friends asked me in the US to help some of the high-profile Afghans to evacuate. We helped 5 families, 37 people. My dad went into Kabul with some other men, though as we are from Waziristan, so they're well respected in that way in Taliban. So when we went there, it was all over in the area. Like, people were very scared, and there were. So my dad would contact them and pick each family separately, and no luggage, nothing with them, just whatever they could grab with them. And when we couldn't take them through Torkham border because we wanted them to come to Pakistan first. They did not have any documents, anything. So Torkham border couldn't do anything. Then we brought them to Bolduc, Spin Bolduc, which is like almost a day. Like, they traveled all night, and then the next day they arrived in the evening.
So I would like to wrap it up,
Spin
please.
Bolduc, so yeah,
very much,
that's
Mr.
how
Baker.
it happened. It was very difficult, but we brought.
Okay, thank you. And now we are going to Mr. Brunel Decep for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and it's delightful to see you in person. I'd like to thank all the witnesses who are here this evening. It's obvious that we are dealing with admirable people devoted to the cause of the Afghan people. We're very lucky to have you here, and I think that we can make this study advance positively, thanks to you in part, and use your testimony to issue recommendations that will be included in this committee's very important report. As you're aware, this committee, dear witnesses, is tasked to shed light on the Afghan government's humanitarian crisis, as well as the crisis facing the government of Afghanistan. So there will be a two-pronged question. The first is for Ms. Wendy and then Ms. Perez. Here's my question. Are you disappointed? And if so, what is your greatest disappointment as far as the government has managed or mismanaged the Afghan crisis? Because we don't want the same mistakes to occur again in the future.
Sakir.
I think the context has been very challenging with COVID, with responding to all sorts of unanticipated events. So I would reframe your question to say, what would I like to see the government do? I would like to see the government do what it showed it could do when it pulled out the stops to support Syrian refugees in 2015, or even, frankly, what it has done in a matter of weeks for Ukrainian refugees. There are many things that can be done to streamline processes. And I wanted to just give you, because I know there's some of you are very, very familiar with all of these details, but to Mr. Baker's question, there are Afghans who have been refugees, who have UNHCR designation, who are in Turkey, who are in India, who are in Indonesia, who we can sponsor tomorrow. The problem is the people who escaped in August are stuck in limbo. I have an employee who's Afghan. She came to Canada on a student visa 2 years ago. She's a PhD student. Her partner is a Hazara refugee who's been in Indonesia. We can sponsor him. Her family is stuck in Pakistan. We can't do anything for them. Her sister was accepted at a Canadian post-secondary institution, just like she was, and she was denied a student visa because they did not believe she would return to Afghanistan. I'm sorry, but it makes no sense. And because my orientation is very much driven by the needs of Canada's economy, because the boomers like me are retiring or dying, I hope to do the first before the second. Our employers, large and small, are desperate for workers, desperate for highly educated, highly skilled workers, but also for general labor. And there are huge opportunities, I think, to create pathways for refugees that will make them self-sufficient in a short period of time.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much. And a couple of words from Ms. Perez on the same question, please.
Okay, if I make a comment.
Ms. Bazir, let Ms. Perez go first, and then I will go to Mr. Bruno Decep if he wants you to answer.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Merci, Minister Brunel.
Thank you very much, Member Brunel.
Echo. Oh, I think I have the interpretation on. I'm just going to turn that off so that I can hear myself speak. I would just echo much of what Wendy has shared and reframe to what is it that we need. I would say that there has been a slow release of the plan for a quote unquote emergency response. And so we are in need of clear and ongoing communication to best be able to plan and to also manage the interests that we're seeing, that we're receiving on a regular basis as SAWs. And I think that the IRCC department needs to be resourced sufficiently to be able to process the existing inventory, the Afghan response, and this Ukrainian response, and would also echo a lot of what Wendy said in terms of the response to Ukraine and that setting a precedent for how emergency responses can be handled. There is a strong Afghan diaspora community here. We have well-networked organizations, the SAWs, as well as organizations like Wendy's, who are eager to harness public interest, civil society good, funds and time, and just need clarity of how we can best plan for that and do that in a rapid way. I think also recognizing that we need to look at this surge moment also as an opportunity to grow sustainability within our infrastructure, within our sector, recognizing that the private sponsorship program is a pillar of resettlement here in Canada, and where are there areas that we can learn from the Syrian response and that most recent surge to grow and build the infrastructure that we need for sustainability. And I would argue a key part of that is supporting sponsorship agreement holders to grow and to be able to respond to this need. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give 30 seconds additional time to Mr. Bruno Decep if you want Ms. Bazir to get in.
Oui.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Ms. Bazir, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. So, we have refugees crises all over the world, and a lot of refugees are coming to Europe, to Canada, to America. All those countries are accepting them. And now from Ukraine and Syria, all those refugees. But there are also, and I think, right now, there are refugees that we are right now arranging sports clinics and camps for them right here in Toronto. They are from Afghanistan. But again, there are a lot of refugees in Pakistan who are living in miserable conditions. And, I feel that you cannot bring everybody to Canada or to Europe. We can help them right there, but we have to, I am here, I'm from that region. I have the awareness of these people. I can speak the languages. Same thing with other Afghans here who can reach them. And I do go and I do hold awareness campaigns for them, clinics for them. We did a sports awareness clinics there and tournaments there where the And I think this is how we build good relations there too. And these people, we can reach to them. I want to build a sports center for them, but alone I cannot do it because I need help from the government. And I think,
Thank you
from
very
different
much,
governments.
Ms. Bajir.
And that's possible.
It's been over a minute,
So,
so thank you kindly. And
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.
I will go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your presentations and for your excellent work. I'd like to first go to Kaylee, if I may, with the sponsorship agreement holders piece. Do I understand you correctly that you're asking for the government to not put a limit on the privately sponsorship refugees for Afghanistan?
Thank you, Mrs. Kwan. My specific comment was in regards to the eligibility criteria that is currently in place for Afghan refugees. So right now, in order to be able to submit the private sponsorship application of an Afghan, you either have to be a part of an LGBTQI group, a persecuted religious minority group, human rights defenders group, women leaders group, or journalists group, be affiliated to one of those types of groups. And so my comment was in regards to the eligibility criteria being limiting, and why not enabling all Afghans to be able to access the private sponsorship of, to be able to access private sponsorship.
Thank you. But aside from eligibility rules, to which I absolutely agree, the government needs to expand and to allow for Afghans anywhere or any group to be able to make application. But accessing a sponsorship agreement holder is very difficult. There are a lot of people who cannot access that. And so should the government expand and lift the cap, frankly, on privately sponsored refugees? Just a quick answer, and if I may then go to Wendy for the same question.
Thank you, Mrs. Member Kwan. We don't have, our association does not have an explicit position on that. What I would share is we are concerned about the high inventory and the potential that a lifted cap could raise on the processing in an equitable way for all refugees.
Maybe I can go to Wendy very quickly just on that question, and I do want to come back to the processing delay and the lack of resources. I want to come back and address that.
Yes, so our position would be raise the cap if the SAWs are concerned, and we understand their concerns about equity and so on. Lift the cap for group of 5, make it easier for group of 5 to do the sponsorship. I'll talk more about how different things are now than they were before, but suffice it to say, you now need to come up with $100,000 up front to support families with many of the SAWs. That's not reasonable or sustainable. And there are other models that have worked well in the past and will continue to work.
On the issue around determination, refugee determination, Wendy, you actually suggested that what the government should do, which is what the NDP has been calling for a very long time, and is for the government to lift the requirement for refugee determination for groups of 5. It makes no sense to make that requirement there, and especially now in the face of what's going on in Afghanistan, should the government lift that refugee determination requirement, similar to what they have done with Syrian refugees?
I believe so, and I believe that we can still institute security and health checks to keep people safe.
Now, on the question around resources, there's no questions. There's a lack of resources in processing the application. The minister actually at the Immigration Committee indicated that it takes on average 3 years for privately sponsored refugees to actually make their way to Canada. They were contemplating that for the Ukraine situation. And if it's going to take 3 years, it's too long. And you're right that there are too many people who are stuck in the backlog. What should the government do by way of resourcing properly so that we we can get the people who's been waiting in the queue, backlogged in the queue from other countries, but as well as the people who are now in need of refugee status. Should they apply the same measures, immigration measures that they have made available to Ukraine, so that people can come with a temporary residence permit and then make the application for refugee status here in Canada, or even extend that to privately sponsorship opportunities?
There are innovative approaches that governments have used in the past. 25,000 Syrian refugees came in 4 months because the Prime Minister and the Minister made a commitment and pulled out the stops. Whether you do it in the way they're doing with Ukrainians, or whether we do it the way we did with Syrians, it's possible. But it does require resources, and more importantly, it requires shared political will. This can't be a partisan issue. This has to be a Canadian project.
I would agree that there needs to be innovation. Mind you, though, in the Syrian refugee initiative, the government didn't quite do it in 4 months. But notwithstanding, though, I get your point. What you're saying is that it can be done much better than what is being done now. And what it needs is, I think, collaboration to which from all the parties and with the NGOs on the ground to get this work done. If the government is willing to lift the cap and make that available, make that opportunity available, I would absolutely agree with that. With respect to backlogs, though, I do want to come back to it, because part of the problem is this. The government announced the process for Afghans. However, they did not put additional resources into IRCC. Not only are people in other countries, refugee status in other countries, backlogged, all immigration streams have been backlogged, and it's complete chaos. And that is the situation right now. The government says that they have put in additional resources, but it's not enough. It's not enough to deal with what we are dealing with right now. So from that perspective, should there be a dedicated specific response and resources, both in financial resources as well as immigration levels numbers, to address the issue? Can I just get a quick answer?
Sure. Madam Kwan, it's already 30 seconds over. Okay, go ahead, please, quick.
Yes, and business process reengineering is essential. Doing things the way we've always done them and throwing money at it is, in my view, not efficient.
Yes, to increasing the immigration levels. That is crucial for having resources be dedicated to process the existing inventory. Resources are needed at IRCC to hire staff to process cases, also into settlement providing organizations to be able to make sure they are intentionally connecting with privately sponsored refugees and sponsors, and then also funding the infrastructure of sponsorship agreement holders to be able to say yes to working with new and additional sponsors.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to Mr. Raff for 2 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Did you say 2 minutes, Chair? All right. Well, anyway, my first question is to Maria, and I just want to thank her for inspiration and leadership. Having spent time in Afghanistan, I understand the challenges of or lack of equality, and so it needs strong women leaders like yourself to make the case, because that's what we need to get out of the to help inspire and help to change the culture, because ultimately, I think there is changes that need to happen in Afghanistan. So I want to focus, because in my opinion, we failed as a country in getting enough Afghans out before the actual fall of Kabul and Afghanistan into the Taliban's hands. And I want you to just sort of emphasize the importance of why we need to get more of those people out, and we got to lift these barriers to get those Afghans out of the country that are being targeted, in particular because of the dire situation, in particular young girls.
Thank you, sir. I would say that Afghanistan has been in a war for decades. And these people have lived in this kind of violent situations, and aggressive behavior has become their daily routine. Of course, people were very scared when Taliban took over, because they remember the history, and everybody, when they were jamming all the airports, I saw all men. And I did post about that. I'm like, I did send a message. I'm like, women were the one who suffered the most in these regions, and you are leaving the women there in the houses, but you are the one who are fleeing, and they were all men fleeing. So I was like, we need to help these women, these girls. But again, I would say that we need to make sure that we find the people from among them. So I make this offer to Canadian government that I'm here. I can play the role as a mediator between the Taliban, my people, my region, and I speak the language. I speak English, and I really care about humanity, these people, and I think I can make a difference. I
very
can
much,
talk to
Ms.
them,
Wazir.
they will understand, and we are family.
Thank you kindly. And now I'm going to go to Sister Ms. Jahid for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the three witnesses for appearing before the committee and talking about the issues which matter to the Afghans. I only have 2 minutes, so I'll be very quick. My first question is for Ms. Wazir. I want to thank you for your inspiring work with women and the girls in Afghanistan, seeking to empower through the power of sports. You mentioned that the situation for the young girls and women who have fled Afghanistan and are in Pakistan, the situation is not like they are facing adverse conditions. What do you think the Canadian government can do to support them so that they can get the education they need? Even for the girls who have fled Afghanistan and those girls who are in Afghanistan, and some daily activities like sports can be part of their activities. So what would you like to comment?
Well, one of my dream project, I tell you that we have been working on this like a sports center, but this will give them all the workshop. We have designed in a way that it will give them all the opportunities. We want to bring those from the tribal areas. It will be all women's sports school, which will be a unique idea in this region. And people trust me, my family now. And also this will be all girls and women. So people will be comfortable, culturally appropriate. And I want to go, I go into these regions, into this area. I was going to visit Kabul recently, but I just delayed it. So I'm telling you that I go into these regions. I do talk to the people, and people, I know that they want their girls into schools and sports, and I can arrange all the workshops for them, the facility that I want to build. This will give them all opportunity, and I want to bring those. We have a lot of support from the Western, like we have them to feel that these people are not different. The fear is because people are so apart from each other. That's why people are scared from West. So I want them to bring together, be in the camps together, teach each other. And I think this will go away, this fear.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wazir, and thank you, Sister Jahid, for 2 minutes. And now I will go to Mr. Bruno Desep for a minute and a half, whatever.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So I'll be as quick as possible. I'd like to congratulate you witnesses. You've been fantastic. I clearly agree with you. This should not be a partisan issue. This committee has to produce a report that will be crucial for what is to come. Since I don't have much time, Ms. Wendy and Ms. Perez, if you could both respond, what would be the top number one recommendation that this committee should go forward with? Go ahead.
Prima facie designation of Afghans as refugees.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, that's quick indeed. Ms. Perez.
I would say investing in the development of an emergency response framework that is set with objective criteria so that can determine how emergency responses are handled in the future, and for IRCC to be funded sufficiently to process this Afghan response and have it not impact the existing caseload.
Mr. Bruno Desep, appreciate that. Now, Madam Khan, for minute and a half, whatever.
Thank you. A quick question. The government announced that they would provide a extended family sponsorship process for Ukraine. Should the government be applying the same special immigration measure for Afghanistan? So question to both Wendy and to Kaylee.
I believe there are many innovative approaches that can be used, and that's certainly one that would be very helpful to many of the families we're dealing with. For example, my employee that I mentioned.
I don't know if you're able to answer the question. It might be outside of your realm, but I wonder whether or not we should be exercising and expanding all the measures to people in Afghanistan.
I don't have a particular response to your specific question. I'm not familiar in detail with what has been set up for the Ukrainian family reunification response. But what I would say is, as you have mentioned, expanding and maximizing use of all of the available pathways to resettle Afghans in need is something we would support.
Can Maria just quickly say yes or no to that question?
Go ahead, Ms. Wazir.
I missed the question. I don't.
My quick question was whether or not the government should expand immigration measures to allow for extended family sponsorship applications for Afghanistan.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to thank all these governments. They're already doing a lot. We still have those Afghan refugees in Pakistan. They're staying with us, and their applications are in process. And I think those who are stuck already, I think these kind of things should speed up because there are high-profile Afghans who are stuck and whose applications are still under process and taking long time. So yeah, I really think this would be wonderful.
And thank you, Madam Kwan. And on behalf of all members of Parliament Committee, I want to thank the three witnesses and your input into this is very important and well taken. So thank you kindly. All the best.
Chair,
to
point
you.
of order.
Mr. Raff, yes.
Yeah, just before the witnesses are dismissed, I'd like to request Ms. Perez submit to the committee her ideas behind the objective criteria for the framework development. If she could submit that in writing, knowing we don't have time here, and including. Well, I guess that's it. That was my question.
Thank you. I'm going to suspend the meeting for a few minutes for the next panel. Again, we will now welcome the members on this panel, the witnesses that are here. From Aga Khan Foundation Canada, we have Khalil Sharif, Chief Executive Officer. From the Center for Newcomers, we have Dr. Kelly Ernst, Vice President, Vulnerable Populations. And from Global Affairs Canada, former Ambassador of Canada to Afghanistan, Reed Sears. Welcome to each of you, and you have 5 minutes to make your opening remarks, and please respect the time. So we will start with Mr. Sharif for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you for inviting me to share some perspectives on the committee's work based on the Aga Khan Development Network's extensive and long-standing presence in Afghanistan. Our work to improve the quality of life of Afghans stretches back 30 years, and our commitment to and presence in the country today remains firm and permanent. Let me begin with some brief background. Aga Khan Foundation Canada is a Canadian global development agency that has partnered with the Government of Canada and Canadians to improve the quality of life of communities in Asia and Africa for 4 decades. The foundation itself is part of a global family of agencies known as the Aga Khan Development Network, founded by His Highness the Aga Khan. The network operates in over 30 countries and reaches millions of people annually. Our partnership with Canada in Afghanistan began in 1996, at another urgent time in the country's history. The support of the Government of Canada was critical to our early humanitarian efforts then, and Canada has remained one of our core partners since that time, including through the far-sighted support of Global Affairs Canada, the International Development Research Centre, and notably, thousands of individual Canadians who have contributed as donors, fundraisers, and volunteers, providing essential support over these years. During this time, we have reached millions of Afghans by enabling strong local organizations, improving the quality of and access to essential services such as healthcare and education, advancing the empowerment and equality of women and girls, investing in infrastructure, and increasing economic opportunity. In all these activities, we have built on the principle of pluralism, a principle that values Afghanistan's rich diversity and supports the inclusion of all segments of Afghan society. Canada's work to support the equality of women and girls has been a particularly important part of that partnership. Today, the AKDN's work in Afghanistan ranges from humanitarian response and the provision of essential services to cultural restoration, telecommunications, hospitality, and financial services. The AKDN employs some 10,000 staff, almost all of whom are Afghan, giving it distinctive reach and scale. In the face of the current humanitarian emergency, our response plan alone aspires to reach some 3 million Afghans. We operate with a network of international partners and ongoing collaborations with the UN system and its agencies. This presence and experience has taught us that determined, transparent, and inclusive engagement, led and driven by Afghans in their communities, can and does succeed. At this time of change and uncertainty, our approach is to listen to and support people at the community level to help them realize their aspirations for a better life, coming together to find solutions that are sustainable, acceptable, and deliverable. The priority now for us today most certainly must be to meet urgent life-saving needs. In addition to the distribution of food, cash, and other necessities, we must also urgently invest in agriculture, livelihoods, and small enterprise to stop the downward economic spiral and reduce the need for humanitarian assistance over time. Support to essential services, such as healthcare and education, especially for women, girls, and other marginalized groups, is likewise critical. But even as we meet these urgent needs, we must at the same time build for the future by investing in a wide range of local development efforts, especially by supporting community organizations and the institutions that enable them. By ensuring that the voices of Afghan citizens continue to be heard at the community level, these local organizations can continue to be a positive and constructive force for development, stability, and peace throughout the country. So we are ready to work with Canada, as we are today working with other international and local partners to advance this work. But we face significant barriers. One is the general banking crisis that is restricting funding flows and economic activity in the country. But another is the barrier that is specifically preventing Canada, both the government and other Canadian actors, to mount the kind of response that our values and our track record in Afghanistan demands. Most importantly, Canadian actors need a clear, predictable, and enduring framework to ensure that those activities we all agree are paramount are not inadvertently caught by provisions of the criminal code regarding anti-terrorist financing or by applicable sanctions. Therefore, we would encourage the committee to prioritize swift changes in policy and legislation that would facilitate this critical work, just as the UN Security Council and other like-minded partners have now already done. Let me conclude, Mr. Chairman. Neither the aspirations of ordinary Afghans nor the solidarity of ordinary Canadians have been disrupted by the changes of the last several months. We are certain that with the right focus and will, Canada can continue to be a positive force, a beacon of hope and confidence, and a significant contributor to an improved quality of life for all Afghans at this difficult time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif. And now we'll move to Dr. Ernst for 5 minutes. Please go ahead. You're on mute, Dr. Ernst. Please unmute yourself. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'll give you a bit of background about what I'm about to say. I'm here from the Center for Newcomers in Calgary. We're a large settlement organization with a dedicated refugee response and have a team of people working on the Afghan response. Our scope, though, is not the immediate arrival, but after they arrive and are here for a few weeks or months, we try to provide support to people. And we do that within collaborative effort with local groups such as the Calgary ESO Newcomer Collaborative, which is a collaborative of more than 100 different groups, and with national groups as well. So for example, for the LGBT people, we work with private sponsors and the Rainbow Coalition for Refuge across the country. What I'm about to say is based on feedback from the Afghan community leaders locally, Afghan people themselves that I've met with and had focus groups with, and service providers who have now provided services to more than 400, well over 400 people, and feedback from various service partners. One of the most important issues that we're facing are the barriers that are associated with the differential support of services based on immigration type. So those that are separated based on being a government refugee, or pardon me, government assisted refugee, a privately sponsored refugee, or maybe a refugee claimant, or those seeking asylum in Canada, all Afghans all get different types of services based on their status. And it's very false in our mind, and it really needs to be cleaned up. So those that get the most support are obviously the government-assisted refugees. They get all of the services that they wish. The privately sponsored, although they're eligible for those services, our experience with privately sponsored refugees is they don't always get the services that they need because private volunteers and sponsorship groups don't always know the services even within their own communities. Claimants are not offered English language or settlement support until they become permanent residents. And of course, asylum seekers who have not started their claim get the least amount of support and have to rely on private people for that support. The other issue that I'd like to raise is the differential response, of course, is in our mind not well received by claimants, especially knowing that 100% of Afghan refugee asylum seekers in Canada were accepted by the Immigration and Review Board. Yet they have to wait months, if not years, to get the services that they need until they are permanent residents. Often it is pointed toward provincial, municipal, and private people to provide that support, but that too is very differential. So provincial supports or municipal supports do not equal federal supports that are provided through IRCC. So that differential supports truly needs to be eliminated. That equality of services across whatever the status of the refugee is extremely important. And as one of the last panelists said, a prima facie noting of a refugee as they arrive, regardless of how they arrive, is extremely important. That also extends to what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment. We are also receiving dozens and hundreds of requests from people from Afghanistan that are either internally displaced or recently displaced outside of Afghanistan to come to Canada, and there's very little we can do with them given the lack of response from IRCC in those areas and the inability to respond from private sponsors. So with that being said, I know my time is up, so happy to answer questions later.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ernst. Now we will go to former Ambassador of Canada to Afghanistan, Mr. Serge. Please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, honorable members and colleagues. On the October 14th, 2020, I was appointed as Canada's 11th ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. This was my second posting to Kabul following my first tour in 2014. During my time, I represented the Government of Canada's interests in the country, focusing on bilateral relations, programming in human rights, official development, and security assistance. The vast majority of this was managed through multilateral, non-governmental, and civil society organizations, with the support of my team at the embassy, colleagues in Ottawa, and at other missions in the region. My team also supported me in working with the international community to monitor peace talks between the Taliban and the Islamic Republic, which were taking place in Doha. As security conditions in the country deteriorated, our priorities expanded to include updating travel advisories and consular messages, exploring options to continue programming in an environment shared with or controlled by the Taliban, developing plans to maintain an embassy presence in Kabul after the withdrawal of NATO, and plans for various evacuation scenarios. Le Canada a un lien.
Canada has a deep connection to Afghanistan and the Afghan people. Over the past 20 years, we have worked alongside these citizens of Afghanistan to achieve tangible results in democracy, human rights, education, health, and freedom of the press that have effectively changed the country from what it was in 2001. A generation of women and men have participated in democratic political processes. The rights of women and minorities have been promoted and advanced. A free and vibrant press has flourished, telling the stories of Afghans and holding the government to account. Literacy rates, especially for women and girls, have improved dramatically, and infant mortality rates have declined. Our legacy includes a generation of Afghans who have seen and experienced a freer way of life with a government that takes responsibility for providing social services, an improved standard of living, and a country where women and girls are active in all aspects of society.
Providing a reasonable duty of care has been a constant challenge in Kabul. The threat of terrorist attacks and kidnapping, coupled with widespread prevalence of COVID-19, the uncertainty of fragile peace talks, and decreased staff levels at the embassy greatly impacted where and how we did our work. The complete collapse of the Afghan forces and Taliban's rapid takeover of Afghanistan came as a surprise to everyone. Up until a few days before the decision to temporarily suspend embassy operations, Canada and the international community were expecting difficult times in August and September, but not a complete takeover of the capital. In fact, we expected the Afghan military to defend the city until the onset of winter, allowing time for negotiations to continue. With this in mind, we are considering options to maintain a skeletal presence throughout the fall, so we could continue essential programming as well as support possible evacuation efforts. With the support of a special advisory team from the Canadian Armed Forces, we're able to continually update our concepts of operation, from maintaining a presence in the country to a temporary suspension of operations and implementation of a non-combatant evacuation operation. This team was also instrumental in securing space in the air bridge that became an essential bridge for getting so many people out of the capital. On the 15th of August, Kabul fell with next to no resistance to the Taliban. The president and his senior advisors fled to the country and the airport was overrun. Later that afternoon, I left Afghanistan with the remainder of my team, some Afghans, foreign diplomats, and international contractors on a Canadian military flight. A few days later, with the support of the Canadian Armed Forces, a special consular team was able to return to Kabul's airport to resume evacuation efforts. Working under extremely harsh, very fluid and dangerous conditions, this civilian and military team helped Canada assist approximately 3,700 people leave the country by the end of the month. Malheureusement, comme nous l'avons.
Unfortunately, as we all found out, this was just the beginning of a huge undertaking that became more and more complicated in a country under the control of the Taliban. While efforts continue to ensure safe passage for Canadians and Afghans, the growing humanitarian crisis and deteriorating human rights situation is of deep concern. Despite this sad state of affairs, Canada will pursue its efforts in combating terrorism and in demanding that the Taliban uphold their international obligations. Thank you very much.
And we're going to go to the honorable members of Parliament first. And we're going to go to Honorable Mr. Chong for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ambassador Sirs, for appearing in front of us today, and thank you for your service. Congratulations on your new appointment to Argentina. Thank you for your service in Afghanistan. You said something in your opening remarks that is somewhat surprising to me. You mentioned that the fall of Kabul on August 15th took you by surprise. At what point did you realize that Kabul was going to fall? Was it the day or two before or the day of? When did you realize that they weren't going to stay outside the capital, the Taliban, and that they were going to come in and take it over? When was that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I received information on the 12th of August, which was the Thursday before, which led me to believe that the security of the embassy and all the people who worked within its compound were at risk of attack from the Taliban.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It seems to me that the intelligence that and advice that you got as ambassador wasn't, as accurate as it should have been, because from afar, at the other end of the world here, it was clear to many of us in July that Kabul was going to fall. Just reading your standard suite of quotidian publications like the New York Times, it was pretty clear what was happening, and hence statements and letters that were being written by the opposition urgently calling on the government to begin an immediate evacuation were issued in several times in June and July of that year. So I just make that general point. The other question I had, so is it safe to say that the real urgent evacuation efforts began, around or after August 12th? Because when you look at the data, approximately 850 people were evacuated by Canada leading up to August 16th. And then suddenly between August 15th and August 29th, some 2,800 people were evacuated. So clearly evacuation efforts significantly increased after the fall of Kabul on August 15th. Was that a result of the government being in caretaker mode, or was that a result of the fall of Kabul and the urgency that that fall of Kabul triggered amongst staff?
When we made the decision to evacuate on the 12th, as I said, that was based on information we got from other sources. We had actually started the process for SIMS beforehand. And so we were looking at removing those who are associated with the embassy as being immediately identified as vulnerable to attacks from the Taliban. And so the process started, the paperwork started to get them prepared to evacuate out. And as a result, people were starting to move out in early August, and then they continued, as you know, through the rest of the month.
So when did that planning begin? When did the planning begin? Did it begin in July, or did it begin well before that?
Planning in terms of the SIMS policy itself actually went back into March, where we were working with IRCC to come up with a plan for how to introduce a new public policy for special immigration.
Okay, and did the government ask for advice on evacuating Afghans with enduring ties to Canada? Or was this planning that was done, at the behest of organically by Global Affairs, or was this triggered by direction or advice from the government, a request for advice from the government, or direction from the government, from the cabinet?
Ambassador Serge, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So essentially, when we started, we raised the flag back in the fall, and actually the flag was first raised in the assumption that we're facing a big climate crisis. Drought was becoming quite profound, and so we started pushing forward in regards to how do we start dealing with the massive onslaught of people who will likely show up at the borders because they don't have food, because they don't have water. And that evolved as we saw the deterioration of the talks evolved into a discussion on this is going to be more profound. We actually do start to worry that the outcome is not going to be positive in favor of the Republic continuing. And so we better start looking at coming up with measures to get people out.
So I have just a general last question. To the period ending August 25th of 2021, NATO allies, including Canada, evacuated over 70,000 people from Hamid Karzai International Airport. The UK alone evacuated over 11,000 people. We evacuated some 3,700 people, disproportionately less than NATO partners and allies. The UK is roughly double our size. They evacuated almost 3.5 times what we evacuated, and the US is 10 times our size, and they certainly evacuated, a lot of people in the weeks, months leading to August, the end of August. Why is it? Why was our response slower than that of our NATO allies and partners?
And time is up, sir. Ambassador Sir, very briefly, please. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's a complicated situation because we're actually dealing with a lot of countries trying to get out all at once. And so the US had a lot more people in the ground, and I'm not sure if the numbers that are quoted actually include a lot of their own people who are already part of the US stream and not a part of an immigration stream.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Chong. And now we'll go to Parliamentary Secretary, Madam Dama, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. Ambassador Sirs, I have a few questions for you. First, just a comment on what you were saying at the end there. I mean, you mentioned the US still had a large footprint on the ground, whereas Canada had left, I think it was about 10 years prior to that. We've heard a lot during our committee hearings about the challenges of getting Afghan citizens out of Afghanistan now. You're in a unique position that you can tell us a little bit about the difficulties in getting people who had supported Canada the documents they needed to immigrate and leave from the Afghan government, so prior to the fall, and also whether the Afghan government was putting up any barriers to its own citizens in leaving the country to come to Canada.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, the documents required to leave the SIMS process was quite straightforward in terms of documentation. We realized early in the game that we needed to come up with a mechanism, and that was actually RSCC that came up with a mechanism called the single journey travel document. And that was something that allowed people to get out of the country relatively quickly without a whole lot of core documentation like a passport. You know, we had children who were just born 2 weeks ago, and they obviously didn't have a national identity card nor a passport. The issue that we found in the processing of people at the airport very early in the game was the Afghan government started barring people who did not have passports or national identity, the tashkiras, onto the planes. In fact, we had one flight that actually was forced to offload about 60 or 70, I think it was about 70 passengers, because there was one person on the plane who did not have a passport in their hand. When I made interventions with the Office of the National Security Advisor, as well as with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I asked for special exemptions and waivers. We were given one for one flight, and they were told after that, never again. I discussed the issue with my colleagues, other embassies, the British Embassy, American Embassy, the Dutch, the Danes, for example, and they all had the same problem. They were having difficulties getting people out because they could not get the appropriate documentation to get on the flights to leave the country. In the end, it came down to a question of a senior policy level decision. The president of the country did not want Afghans leaving because he felt there would be a brain drain. And we retorted that we needed to have part of the brain come with us so he can come back and build the country later on.
Thank you. When we were there and we had a footprint on the ground and then left, do you know why we didn't do the time to bring some of these people to Canada? The previous government brought some, there's no doubt, there were some interpreters that came here. But is there a reason that you're aware of why we didn't just bring those people to Canada at the time? 10 years passed from when we were in Canada until now.
Thank you. Ambassador Serge, please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, back in 2013, there was actually another special immigration program for former interpreters of the military.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson.
Second. Okay, I'll stop. Here we go. Thank you. Suspended for a few seconds, please.
our meeting, the Special Committee on Afghanistan. We'll continue with Ms. Damoff. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I think Ambassador Sirs was answering my question.
Go ahead, Ambassador Sirs.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just quickly to recap, in 2013, there was an immigration program, a special program for interpreters with the Canadian military. That program actually ran through its course, and it appeared when I arrived in 2014 that there were those who had missed out, and it actually appealed for another round of the program. At that time, Ambassador Lyons and I made a recommendation to Ottawa to elevate this at the time it was CIC, and basically see if there was an opportunity to open the program again. The minister at the time decided that no, that sufficient time had been granted, and so the matter wasn't pursued any further.
So we could have actually gotten those people out sooner if we'd increased the numbers, but it was decision by the government not to pursue it. Is that right?
I can't say on how many we would have got out,
right,
but there may have been an opportunity to get some more people out of the country at that time. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Chair, how much time has I got left? Because I kind of lost
you have a minute.
Okay. So I'm going to, Mr. Sharif, I have a question for you. You had talked about how you have 10,000 staff, and it's obvious that you've got quite a large experience and footprint on the ground in Afghanistan. We know the Taliban is preventing unaccompanied women from leaving the country. Do you have any suggestions on how we can get around this?
Thanks very much for the question. Look, our focus in all candor is to figure out a way to operate in the country for the people who are remaining.
Okay.
They're as you know, the very tens of millions of Afghans who will continue to remain in the country indefinitely. So I really don't think I can add very much to that difficult question.
Okay. Thank you, Madame Damoff, and thank you, Mr. Sharif. Monsieur Brunel-Duceppe, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Brunel-Duceppe, you have the floor for 6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to thank our witnesses for participating in this important study. And Mr. Sears, Ambassador, I'd like to thank you for your important service in a very difficult context. My question will be directed at Mr. Sharif. You seem to be in contact with a number of NGOs and a number of folks who work in humanitarian circles, and what we've heard in the committee from some NGOs who've already appeared before the committee, it's that it's difficult for us to work on the ground in Afghanistan because of the criminal code and because they're considered terrorists, and that we're afraid of being prosecuted. Have you gotten wind of that issue coming into play?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. It is a very serious question and a very serious problem. And I think one thing I hope that the committee might look at with some focus is how we can create a predictable, enduring, flexible framework for Canadian actors, the government and others to operate in the country.
Some witnesses told us that a motion could be moved in the House of Commons calling on unanimous consent of the House that would reassure NGOs and indicate to them that they wouldn't be prosecuted if they go about their important work on the ground. Do you think that's a good idea?
Mr. Chairman, my sense is that we're going to have a pretty robust set of responses to this. We basically have a situation where we have a policy agreement that we should mount a very significant response and a legal impediment to doing so, and we need to bridge that gap. And I think we have to ask Parliament to act in probably a series of ways. But what I would say is this should be an enduring fix. It shouldn't be a short-term fix. It should be an enduring fix, because this is likely to be a situation we're going to confront for some time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif. On the 25th of August, AFGH Canada said that your organisation, and I quote, looked after permanent coordination with the authorities donors and other stakeholders that supported the program and the initiatives of the organization. Are you obligated to work alongside the Taliban currently, sir?
Mr. Chairman, we are present in the country, as I've indicated. Our posture has been from the very beginning to be proactively communicative, to be transparent and open with the de facto authorities about what we're doing and why. This allows us to continue operating in the country to safeguard the safety of our staff and our beneficiaries, and that's something we're going to continue having to do.
Good.
Thank you, and thank you for what your organization does, Mr. Sharif. It's very much appreciated. Mr. Sears, on the 15th of August 2021, Canada ceased its activities in Kabul and repatriated its diplomats. Why did Canada decide not to leave any representatives at the Kabul airport during the evacuation operations, sir?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Bruno Duceppe. On the 15th of August, it was a very chaotic day. When we actually were preparing to leave to go into the airport compound, it was evident that a lot was going on. We could hear explosions. We could see fires all over the city. When we came into the airport, the military side of the airport itself, it was very obvious that the city was coming under siege. And it became evident to us that a whole bunch of chaotic activity was taking place and was going to escalate and grow quite a bit. So for us, when it came down to why not leave anybody behind, at the time, it looked like that the whole airport was going to be overrun. We saw a lot of military aircraft coming in, offloading equipment, offloading military personnel, and to us, it just seemed to be far too dangerous for us to stay put and leave anybody in harm's way, at least until we could get a sense of what was going to happen to the airport. And as we all saw on the TV, it was 2 planes after ours that the people were hanging off the airplane when the people fell off it. So it was quite close for us. And I think at the time, the decision was the right one to make, to pull all Canadians out so we could actually go back in and continue the effort afterwards.
Thank you, and that much is understandable. I don't think anyone in this room would have liked to have been in your shoes, so hats off once again to you. Could you please tell us what the ramifications of the closure of the embassy on Canada's evacuation plan were?
30 seconds, Mr. Sirs.
If I understand the question properly, the ramifications were a loss in physical presence in the country. We are no longer able to actually physically process people for the immigration program. As a result, that's why we did send people back in as long as we could. But the pressure on the airport, which was the only point of egress for all of us to get out, was so high. Canada wasn't the only country. Of course, we had many other NATO member states, as well as just civilians themselves trying to get out on commercial flights as long as they could. The pressure was so high that we actually couldn't sustain any more volume to go through. We were given time slots to get out and working through this air bridge that I mentioned in my remarks. And Canada had so many time slots to get planes in, load, and get people out. So the real biggest ramification is our inability to continue processing. It's now much more complicated to get people processed through the system and on their way to Canada.
Merci.
Mr. Bruno Duceppe, and we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for your presentation and, of course, for your work. I'd like to first go to the ambassador, if I may. Just following on the line around evacuation or even immigration measures to be made available to Afghans. We've heard from other witnesses, including retired majors, who indicated that there would be opportunities, for example, to go to a third country to provide assistance and to help people get to safety. I wonder whether or not if you have any information or or what you saw on the ground while you were there, how other countries were able to do some of that work. We understand that the United States and some other countries were able to continue that work. Is that something that Canada can learn from those other countries and try to get more Afghans to safety through to third countries, help them get to the third country and then come to Canada?
Go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead, Ambassador Search.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member Kwan. That is, it's an excellent question, which is hard to answer because while we're at the coalface, we're not able to see so much of what people are doing in other countries in terms of getting people to third countries to process. I do know that the complication for us was making sure that we had people properly screened to get on the flights to come to Canada. And I think moving forward, well, we will have to look at policies and regulations with respect to how to process people more effectively, more efficiently. At the time, I think we did a very good job with the constraints that we're facing.
Well, what about going forward? Not just looking back to say now, though, people still need to get to safety. The government's immigration measures only allow for people to access those immigration measures if they're in a third country. Many Afghans are not in a third country. So what can Canada do to facilitate that process? And what can we learn from other countries who have done that? Right now, the government also announced, for example, in Ukraine, that they're setting up biometric centers in neighboring countries. Can we not do the same?
Ambassador Search, please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm going to have to defer that to the immigration authorities who are the experts on that, because certainly we have seen how complicated it can be to get people through the system. We want to make sure we get the right people through the system.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Shuri from the Aga Khan. I think we were just, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe was just asking you about the question around ensuring that NGOs on the ground would be able to provide assistance, humanitarian assistance, without being, without having to worry about prosecution from the Canadian government.
Sorry, I'll stop the time. You can restart the question. And Madam Kwan, please restart your question.
Thank you. Yeah, just follow up on that question. In terms of ensuring that NGOs on the ground will not feel concerned that they might be prosecuted by the Canadian government with the anti-terrorism laws, you talked about durable measure for sure. But in the short term, other countries have done this where they provided an exemption or entering into a contractual agreement where they would be exempted with the anti-terrorism measures. Is that a possible option at this time, given the urgency of the situation?
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much, Ms. Kwan, for that question. Look, obviously, we would welcome such an exemption if it was possible within the Canadian legal framework. I think you're right to say that all other, I think, like-minded partners, or virtually all the like-minded partners, have found a way to carve out the humanitarian and development activities we're talking about. And my sense is that we have to work expeditiously to create whatever is the mechanism that will work that's in accordance with the Canadian legal framework. As you say, I don't think there's a policy issue here. All the other like-minded partners have done this. It's a matter of making sure there's a Canadian solution to this problem.
Well, absolutely. I think that the Canadian government, if they wanted to do it, we can certainly do it. And right now, time is of the essence. So I want to actually ask another question to all the witnesses, if you're aware of this. It's been brought to my attention that the minister has the authority to create public policies to enable the government to assist at-risk Afghan refugees at his discretion, so with his own authority. And in consideration of the vulnerable populations and to protect the integrity of the process, the ministry say that we have not been releasing that information to the public. I wonder whether or not, if any of the witnesses are aware of this situation where the minister has the authority to exercise special decision-making to help at-risk populations, and we don't know what that policy is. Are you hearing that on the ground?
Who do you want the question to?
I'd like to ask Mr. Sharif on that question first, and then we'll go to the other witnesses.
Okay, Mr. Sharif, and then Dr. Ernst, and then Ambassador Sirs.
Mr. Chairman, this is not something I'm current with, so I can't answer the question. Thanks.
I am aware that the public policies have been used to get internally displaced people to Canada. In fact, I have received a number of refugees based on public policies being administered.
Ambassador Sirs?
I'm in the same situation as Mr. Sharif. I'm not up to date on that particular aspect of a policy for the minister.
Very much. That's interesting. I just wonder whether or not on the ground you're experiencing anything, because that statement actually came from the ministry, so we know for a fact that is what's happening. And of course, if we don't know what the public policy is and how it is being applied by the minister and for whom, then how would people know at what point do they actually ask for that special consideration? All right, I'm going to leave that.
Your time is up, but you can have 30 seconds.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So my last question is this. I asked the last panel. The minister has made an announcement for Ukraine that there would be special immigration measures, including sponsorship of extended family members for Ukraine. Should the minister be applying the same measure for Afghanistan? Do you have an opinion on that? Just a quick answer from all the witnesses.
Sharif, and then Mr. Ernst, and finally Ambassador Sirs. Quick, pleast
to say, Mr. Chairman, look, the situation is a crisis situation. We should mount whatever response I think that we can muster, both in the country and then to support those who need to leave.
Dr. Ernst?
Yes, absolutely. Not only in Afghanistan, but in transit countries as well, and here as well.
Ambassador Sirs, please wrap up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And in my case, my opinion is to follow policy, not implement policy. So I would defer to the authorities in immigration, because they would be the best place to decide. Thank you.
On behalf of the members, I would love to thank the witnesses to be present today and for their input into this committee. Appreciate that. All the best to all of three, and particularly Ambassador Sirs, with your new appointment. All the best. Okay, members, thank you, and I'm gonna adjourn the meeting right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.